No, we need it so proud.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the SoloCast. Let's get right down to business and talk some NBA and NHL. First, I want to talk about some NBA. Those of you who were privileged enough and got your request in on time have the actual workbook that I use to come up with my picks. I think it's a good idea for me to get that out there to a limited amount of people, so the people who really wanted to know what cutting-edge sabermetrics actually looks like, well, now you have kind of an idea. As you can see, some of the revolutionary concepts in there, using the output of Pythagorean expectation to influence a scoring model. Again, that's something I do in a lot of sports. It has made me a lot of money, that's for sure. Basically, if you have seen it, you have to have two independent models, saber and margin, agree on the same side of a game, and if they do, then you make a play, with the exception of the bottom three teams as determined by the Sagarin rankings. You can only bet against those teams and not for. This led us to a lot of underdogs, and more specifically, the thing that's been the most profitable and where we've hit our biggest bets has been in false favorites. It's a great formula for determining a false favorite and then laying the wood on there, because you have, out of the three possible outcomes, two of them are profitable. Number one, your team could lose but still cover. The second option is your team could win straight up. And the third option is, well, you could lose and not cover. So that's been working out pretty well. And in NBA right now, we're currently, as of today, after the Pacers 2-bet victory, we are up 31.29 units on the season. Not too bad. NHL is the thing going on right now. Basically, we had over a 33 unit hole blown into our budget from S4 and the lost B6, and our horrible start to the season as I tried to adapt the Sagmar model to NHL, and that did not work very well. So I think this is a good example of how a professional digs out of a hole. We had a pretty big deficit. I didn't go on tilt. I went back to the drawing board without prejudice, most importantly. And sometimes you just have to let the numbers speak for themselves. You know, they'll tell you a lot of things, but you just have to be willing to listen. You may realize that some of the things that have worked in the past might not work at all, or even be relevant at all, as the case was for a few things for me. So after the adjustments, we've made all of our money back and are profitable and in the black again. You know, there's a lot of people who go down 30 units plus or whatever, but on the NHL forum, you can kind of get a day-for-day accounting of what actually happened, and I think it's a good example of how a professional digs out of a hole, not just gives up or just keeps doing the same thing, saying, oh, the market will come back to us. No, it won't. No, it won't. It's not the way to go. It's a very myopic and arrogant viewpoint all at the same time. You have to adjust to market conditions. Now, the thing that I did was I made sure that I'm not exploiting a short-term situation, but something that's more indicative of the current season and its relation to the labor agreement and talent distribution. So I feel really great about that moving forward. The biggest takeaway that I got from that was the theoretical maximum winning percentage for all home teams combined in a month is 54%. So if you think about that, that's the max, not the average. So road teams, at the bare minimum, are going to win 46% of all games in a month. At the bare minimum. So definitely you've seen a focus on road teams, and they've gone 7-2 yesterday, as a matter of fact. And we went 4-1, only missing out on a plus 161 bet after cashing a huge B6 and a bunch of other bets. So it's great. I would say that the new model that I have clearly helps me understand what teams are false favorites, much in the same manner that I now can identify them in NBA and certainly NFL and MLB. So that's been absolutely a huge revolution for me and my bankroll. Now I want to talk a little bit about MLB. Basically, my outreach here in my SoloCast, in my website, and my mentoring is to give people an opportunity to see what a full-time, not somebody with a 9-to-5, but somebody who is a full-time, several years into it, professional does. There's a lot of aspiring professionals out there. I started MLB probably about a month ago in preparation for this season. In the style that I use, sabermetrics and statistical modeling, it's paramount that you get a jump on the action because the workbooks take so long to build. Literally I have, 3 different formulas in a workbook for every single pitcher that throws a pitch that gets updated almost every day. It's enormously time consuming but very profitable. So you have to get a really good jump on the season. And how does that relate to everybody else? Well, doing so enables me to also bet in spring training. What does that yield? Well, last year I was pretty profitable in spring training as well when everybody else is still sitting on the sidelines. Money is money. I don't care if it's spring training or the World Series. If you hit a plus 160 underdog, it's still plus 160 underdog, right? But more importantly, once the regular season did come around and I increased my bet size, there's a lot of limits from books put on what you can do in spring training. I was over 60% for, I think, well over 4, 5, 6 weeks there. I was absolutely destroying it from the beginning, and only a fluke loss on a B6 kind of slowed that train down. So, the hottest team coming out of spring training, one that we bet on a lot, was the Giants. Well, what do you know? They went and won the World Series. So that early season work pays off. And if you bet spring training or preseason of any kind in a sport, it'll make you pay more attention because you're financially invested and it'll pay dividends down the road. It was only later on in the season when people started catching up to what I was doing. We were betting Matt Latos from the beginning and betting a great deal. He was an underdog. Now when people caught on way later, the odds were much worse. We bet a lot on the Padres and won a lot of money. So it is all about early season preparation. You can't start a month into the season or a couple of weeks before a season. It has to start months before the season starts. Analyzing the roster moves. Who's going to have early value? One thing I learned, the Cubs now, after trading Gorzolani here, they have 5 right-handed starters. What do you think is going to happen to them? Besides Zambrano, who's a power pitcher, they have a lot of pitchers that are the same. So obviously, after they have a win and you have a similar pitcher following that, I see a lot of chances there for losing streaks, automatic bets after wins, a whole host of opportunities there that I'm already starting to stake out, even though there's still snow on the ground, and currently where I'm at it's only 7 degrees. So that's a good example of how a professional prepares for a season. I read every website of every team at least once a week, and I also have bookmarked every single home newspaper for every team as well, so I can kind of keep up. The sports books employ large armies of people, statisticians, computers, trends, databases, all kinds of things. And if you want to be a consistent winner in the long run or be a professional, you have to start early. You have to get a jump. You have to get every edge that you possibly can. And starting early definitely helps me a great deal. Knock on wood, I've been a winner in the long run so far, and I don't see any reason for that to change. So as you become a little more experienced, you understand what works, what doesn't, what habits you need to break, which ones you need to continue. And certainly starting early, what months before season starts, figuring out opportunities and getting ready for early season definitely will make you a lot more money than that. And when you really become professional, start wagering large amounts, the thing is your thought process will change. It's easy to, take a flyer on a team if you're only betting $50 or $100 a game, but, you just don't throw out, 10 grand on, speculation. So your thought process definitely changes significantly. So keep that in mind as to where you are and everything like that. Last year was another great example of I expected the Cincinnati Reds to do great things, and we made definitely a lot of money off of them as well. Be prepared for those early season opportunities and to take advantage of them for maximum profit. Last topic I like to touch on is overall planning. I could go on and on about this. I've actually written quite about it in the book that I'm working on. Long-term planning and short-term planning. People ask me, well, okay, what do you mean by that? I'll give you a specific example of planning. My NFL season, I had to make some drastic money management adjustments to make the kind of profit that I'm used to, and that worked out pretty well for me, and I ended up profiting pretty decently. So I went into the playoffs with a plan. I wanted to take 50% of my regular season NFL profits, and I wanted to multiply that roll by 2.25 times by the end of the Super Bowl. So then you start with your goal, then you start planning and taking steps, and then I took advantage of games that I thought were going to be the best in the playoffs. The Packers bet that we hit in the divisional round was my biggest wager besides the Super Bowl. You know, it's not like, well, you just keep winning and escalating your bets. Well, that's not exactly how it goes. I had a plan. I took advantage of the inefficiencies that I saw and profited greatly. This week, we have the championship games, and I'm taking the foot off the gas quite a bit. Why? Because the numbers quite aren't there. You just don't keep betting and betting and betting the same amount or increasing your bets just because you're in a winning streak. You have to have a plan. A plan is to multiply my playoff roll by 2.25 times. Okay. Another example of long-term planning is I know how long I'm going to do this. I'm 35 now. I'm going to retire from this industry at the end of the World Series after I turn 40. That's it. If you do it right, it really doesn't take that long. So if, there's professionals out there or whatever, or people, that you want to emulate, see how long they've been in the business, see how long they've been a full-time professional, and kind of take that into consideration. If you're somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, who's been doing this for 10 years or longer, you really need to evaluate what you're doing if you're not seeing the kind of success that you've had or that you want. So think long and hard about that and try and align that with, realistic goals and steps and planning, and it can happen. As quickly as you can torch your role from doing things the wrong way is as quickly as you can build it by doing the right things. So start off with a goal for every season, every playoff, every regular season, and stick to it. You can do it. And then also have long-term goals, whether they be financial, family-oriented, or whatever. You have to have some kind of impetus to keep you coloring in the lines when things go wrong. And if you listen to the end, I bet the Steelers minus 3.5, and I have the over 42.5 in the early game today. And with that, I think we'll close it out. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this edition of the SoloCast.